Hi everyone, my name is Kimberly and today I'm going to be talking about prostitution. As I hope most of you are aware, prostitution is currently illegal in the United States, with an exception of limited legality in Nevada. It, for the most part, is illegal in the United States. However, there are many campaigns out there that are currently and actively trying to decriminalize sex workers and legalize prostitution. So that being said, I would like to introduce or propose my main claim, which states that the legalization of prostitution would not effectively deter crimes or negative aspects that come with the selling of sex. So I would like to start off by supporting that claim with pointing out that legalization would deepen the repression of women. Not only would legalization make the social disrespect of women's bodies socially acceptable, but it pushes the limit of social morality as a whole. You're then able to ask if this is okay, then what else can be okay? Pushing that door like into the slippery slope or whatever. The overall role of women in society would be tainted for future generations. Future generations would be born into a world that where prostitution was never illegal, was something that's, they're born into a world where prostitution is normal, where it's just an everyday thing. Legalization would also allow for modern slavery. The international definition of slavery is the exercise of powers or ownership over a person. And with prostitution comes pimps and all the other ugly side that a lot of people don't know about. And the pimps do have the power to own, trade, sell prostitutes that would inhibit abuse and other crimes, just like that. Women would lose human value and be seen as nothing more than objects, which obviously goes without saying. My second point, or second supporting claim, is that legalization would not change the psychological effects on these prostitutes. Emotional and physical damage does not change due to the legalization of prostitution. For example, according to Catherine McConnell's speech at the Anti-Human Trafficking Conference in 2013, post-traumatic stress disorder was equally found in victims of prostitution and victims of torture, rape, and combat veterans. According to studies by the Coalition Against Trafficking in Women, 89% of these prostitutes wish to leave the industry. So it isn't a job or an occupation that is necessarily enjoyable or happy for these women. So legalizing that would not change that or, have any effect on that at all. Diane Post is an attorney and a human rights activist. She said that the International Labor Organization report admits that women choose prostitution for economic reasons. Surely no one can argue that this choice is any more than the cattle in the squeeze chute choose to go to their death. So again, it's not something that's necessarily like, oh, I dream one day becoming a prostitute. Like, it's something that these women, it's a last resort that they have to do, and it works. So, legalizing this, again, would not change at all any of the statistics on psychological damage or anything that would happen after post-prostitution. My final supporting claim is that legalization would increase the value of illegal prostitutes. So legalizing would mean that we would have legal prostitution, but it would come with restrictions, obviously, because we are a government. It would need bills, amendments, and that has fine print and everything. This would cause for a higher demand of prostitutes without restrictions, therefore increasing the value of illegal prostitution and not erasing illegal prostitution at all. There's still going to be illegal prostitution, and making those illegal prostitutes more vulnerable to abuse and trafficking, which would essentially just make more abuse, more everything, really. Melissa Farley, founding director of Prostitution Research and Education, says that it is a cruel lie to suggest that decriminalization or legalization will protect anyone in prostitution. It is not possible to protect someone whose source of income exposes them to the likelihood of being raped on average once a week. So in conclusion, I believe that the legalization of prostitution would not effectively deter crimes or negative aspects in any way that come with the selling of sex.
All right, Kimberly, you identify the topic. I think the exception of Nevada might be a good example of an illustration to use as an attention device instead of simply saying you're subject to prostitution. The transition to what your proposition was relatively clear. I could tell immediately what your argument was, except that it's phrased with the negative terminology in it, so I think that's a little bit problematic. There's no preview of what the supporting structure is going to be, which also makes it a little bit harder to follow what's going to come in the rest of the speech. Excuse me. The individual points, though, as you present them, those are clearly cited, and I thought you did a pretty good job on that, although, again, a couple of them are phrased in the negative, which does make it a little bit confusing. Everything on the first point is full, we've got hypotheticals about standards. It's really a value argument that you're presenting here, and you can't use a value argument to support a claim of fact. I do think that you've got a good structure here for a value argument, but it still needs some evidence to demonstrate it. You mentioned, for instance, that they're usually going to be pimps and the ugly side of the business, whatever it happens to be, and that's an assertion on your part. I assume that the restrictions that you are saying aren't going to prevent the harm on the second and third points would be insufficient in some way, but you don't really provide any reason to believe that they are problematic. It's a conclusionary statement that doesn't really have any information to support it. The second point is the one where you had the clearest evidence. You've got a couple of pieces of testimony. You've got a statistic about how women would prefer not to have this as their occupation. I thought you did a good job on developing that. I'm not quite sure that that is one of the reasons that people want to legalize prostitution, is the psychological benefits that it's going to have to the prostitutes. I've heard arguments in favor of legalized prostitution, and that's not one of the issues that usually comes up. And I think as a consequence that it's a little bit of a straw man argument. You're making a good argument against something that I'm not sure is the motivating factor here. There are probably other important factors that need a little bit more refutation than you're giving them. The third point, though, it addresses a couple of those issues, and I do think you have a good claim on that, and it's the one that's most applicable to your proposition. There's only a little bit of information on it, and it seems to be narrowed to the issue of violence, and I don't know that it addresses some of the other things that you're talking about. So I do appreciate the quote that you have there. I just think it's by itself, it's not necessarily sufficient to demonstrate that point. You had some examples. There were a good couple of pieces of testimony that you did cite the sources on, but not all of the sources are being cited. All right. Thank you.